I never expected someone could make a home feel like a courtroom. Last night, I came back from work, exhausted, dragging my feet over the hardwood, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with that same unreadable expression she gets when she's thinking. Not angry, not sad, just precise. And I knew, somehow, that the rules had already shifted again, though she hadn't said a word. She slid a piece of paper toward me, neatly typed, folded in half. I froze, my heart thumping against my ribs like a warning drum. On the page were bullet points, small instructions, almost polite, almost casual. No late-night texts, no checking her phone, no asking about certain friends. There were more. But even reading them made my chest tighten. It felt like a contract I didn't remember signing. I tried to joke, to break the tension. Are we negotiating bedtime now? I said, forcing a laugh. She didn't smile. Just tilted her head slightly, like she was studying a puzzle she already solved. And I knew, wrong move. My brain raced. Was this about us? About something I'd done? Or something she had? I folded the paper slowly, trying to memorize every word, every pause between the bullets. Her gaze followed me like she could read my thoughts. And that's when the first real doubt hit me. Maybe this wasn't about rebuilding anything. Maybe the rules weren't a roadmap for us to get back together, they were a map of something else. Something I couldn't name yet. I sat down, my hands shaking, staring at the table like it had turned into a chessboard and I'd just stepped into a game I didn't know how to play. We'd been together for almost 6 years. I always thought I knew her, her laughter, the way she absent-mindedly twirled her hair when she was nervous, how she liked her coffee black even on weekends. I still remember the first time we met, a crowded bookstore, both of us reaching for the same dog-eared copy of a novel I barely remember now. She smiled, that quiet, mischievous smile, and something clicked. That smile had a way of disarming me, making everything else feel distant, irrelevant. Over the years, we built routines, little rituals that became ours. Friday movie nights, Sunday walks by the river, the way we argued over dumb things like whether the cereal goes before or after the milk. I used to think those arguments were silly, but I loved them. They made life feel ours. Safe, predictable, real, but lately, even the predictable had started feeling fragile. Small cracks, tiny fissures, nothing catastrophic, but enough to make me notice. The way she'd glance at her phone a second too long. How she'd come home from work smelling like someone else's perfume, though she swore she'd been alone. I told myself I was imagining things. Paranoia was easy when your mind was already tired from deadlines and long shifts. Still, even with those little doubts, I never imagined it would come to rules typed on paper, laid out like a contract I didn't agree to. The woman I loved, the one I thought I knew, was now measuring our love with bullet points. And every word made me feel smaller, like I had slipped out of the center of our world without realizing it. I wanted to confront her, to ask why, but I hesitated. Something in her calm, measured posture told me that tonight, my questions weren't welcome. I stayed at that table for what felt like hours, though the clock on the wall didn't move much. Every tick sounded louder than it should have. I traced the edge of the folded paper with my finger, as if touching it could unlock some hidden truth. I wanted to believe she was just trying to protect us, that these rules were a strange, misguided form of care. But there was a weight behind her eyes, a quiet power, and it unnerved me. I thought about all the mornings we'd shared coffee in silence, her head resting on my shoulder as I read the news. Those moments felt distant now, like I was trying to remember a dream that had already slipped through my fingers. I wondered, was she holding on to them too? Or had she already moved on in a way I couldn't see? I tried to picture her happiness, the way she laughed at dumb jokes or hummed along to songs she didn't even like. It was comforting, and terrifying. Comforting because it reminded me why I loved her, terrifying because it made the rules feel like a wall between us. And maybe that wall was intentional. Maybe every instruction on that paper was a reminder that I'd broken something, though I didn't fully understand what, or why. I wanted to argue, to push back, to tell her that love shouldn't come with stipulations. But even in my mind, my words felt weak, swallowed by the quiet she had mastered. I realized I was navigating a relationship I didn't recognize anymore. One where the rules mattered more than the warmth we used to share, and the scariest thought of all. Maybe she wasn't asking for my trust. Maybe she was measuring how much of it she could control. The next few days were a blur of normal routines layered over this growing tension. On the surface, we acted like everything was fine. I made her coffee exactly the way she liked it, and she smiled faintly when she walked into the kitchen, but beneath that, there was an undercurrent I couldn't shake. I noticed little things that didn't make sense. She'd insist I leave my phone in the living room while she worked in her home office, but when I glanced toward her desk, she always had hers close by, sometimes texting with a speed that made me pause. I'd ask harmless questions, "Who's that?" Or "Why the sudden message?" And she'd give an answer so calm, so carefully measured, that it sounded true. And yet, something about it didn't fit. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. She wasn't in the living room, the kitchen was spotless, the coffee untouched. But on the counter, a folded napkin held a single line, "Rules are for both of us." I reread it 3 times, my stomach nodding. It was friendly, almost affectionate. And yet, it felt like a warning, like stepping over some invisible line would have consequences I couldn't predict. I tried to push it aside. Maybe I was reading too much into things, letting paranoia creep in. But as I lay awake at night, the rules replayed in my head, each bullet point twisting into a question I couldn't answer. Who decided these rules? Really? Was it a way to rebuild trust, or a way to control the rhythm of our lives without me realizing it? For the first time, I wondered if I'd been playing by someone else's game all along, without knowing the rules. It all came to a head one Saturday afternoon. I had planned to surprise her with a small bouquet of flowers, hoping for some warmth, some sign that we were still on the same team. I opened the door, flowers in hand, and froze. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, face tight, lips pressed together. "You know," she said without looking up, "I don't like being lied to." Her tone was calm, almost clinical. My stomach sank. "Lied to?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. She finally looked at me, eyes steady. "I saw some messages you sent last week." I swallowed hard. "Messages? What messages?" And then she showed me her phone. Screenshots of conversations I'd thought were private, texting someone from work. Nothing intimate, just chatting, joking. But the way she framed it, the way she stared at me as if she were uncovering a crime scene, made my heart pound. "I can't trust you," she said softly, almost regretfully. "Not until you understand the boundaries." And just like that, everything clicked, or at least, it seemed like it did. I felt the weight of my guilt pressing down, the realization that these rules weren't arbitrary. They weren't meant to be ignored. She wasn't punishing me for an affair, at least not in the way I feared. She was trying to protect herself, to protect us, or so I thought. I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat, promising to follow her rules, to earn back that trust. Relief washed over me, but beneath it, a faint unease lingered, whispering that maybe I hadn't seen the full picture. It wasn't until a week later that I understood what she'd been doing all along. I came home to find her at the table again, not angry, not sad, just calm, deliberate. She pushed a folder toward me. Inside were notes, schedules, even screenshots, everything I had thought I'd hidden. And then it hit me like a punch I couldn't see coming. She already knew, not because of suspicion or surveillance, but because she had orchestrated it. The rules weren't about trust, they were about her sense of control, a way to measure my compliance, my guilt, my willingness to bend to her rhythm. Every bullet point I had thought was a path back to connection was actually a map of leverage. Carefully placed to keep me uncertain, anxious, and dependent. I remembered the night she handed me the typed page, her unreadable expression. That calmness, that precision, it wasn't care. It was power. I realized that the rules I had followed faithfully, thinking they were steps toward reconciliation, had only tightened the cage around me. And in that moment, I understood the quiet calculations behind her gaze, the way she framed every minor misstep as evidence of failure. I wanted to argue, to storm out, to reclaim my sense of self. But I didn't. Because the truth was clear, she had always been 3 moves ahead. And I had been playing the game, thinking it was love, when it was strategy. Sitting there, staring at her calm eyes, I felt something bitter take root, a mix of admiration, fear, and a painful clarity. I had loved someone I didn't fully know, and in the end, the rules had never been about us at all. The days after that revelation were hollow. I went through the motions, work, errands, making coffee, small talk, but everything felt strained, like I was breathing underwater. Even the familiar routines that once felt comforting now carried an edge, a quiet reminder that nothing was as it seemed. She stayed. She smiled at me sometimes, laughed at little jokes, even held my hand when we walked down the street. But the warmth I thought we shared had shifted into something I couldn't name, trust mixed with calculation, affection mixed with strategy. Every gesture now carried a subtle weight, and I found myself second-guessing every word, every glance, every small act of kindness. I tried talking about it, carefully, cautiously. "Are we okay?" I asked one evening. She tilted her head, studying me. "We're fine," she said softly. "We're aligned." But I could feel the unspoken meaning underneath. Aligned didn't mean healed or equal. It meant the game continued, and she was still keeping score. I felt anger, shame, confusion, all tangled together. How had I missed the signs for so long? How had I thought love would guide us back, only to find it had been a lesson in manipulation all along? And yet, I couldn't entirely hate her. There was something brilliant in the way she maintained control, a quiet brilliance that left me both awed and hollow. At night, I lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every rule, every small obedience. And I realize that love can survive in strange, bitter forms, or maybe what I feel isn't love at all, just the residue of what I thought we had. I still don't know if staying was the right choice. Some nights, I watch her sleeping, the soft rise and fall of her chest, and I feel a flicker of what we used to have, a warmth, a closeness, a fragile thread that somehow survived. And I wonder if that thread is real, or if it's just the illusion she carefully allows me to see. She hasn't changed the rules in months, but the power dynamic hasn't shifted either. Every word I speak, every question I hesitate to ask, every glance I hold too long carries weight. And yet, I stay, not out of fear, not entirely, but because leaving feels like admitting I was wrong to trust, wrong to hope, wrong to love someone who could measure affection with bullet points. I catch myself imagining conversations I'll never have, apologies that will never be exchanged, explanations that won't change a thing. I think about all the friends who would tell me to walk away, to reclaim my life, to stop letting someone else write the rules for my heart. But even as I hear their voices in my head, part of me wonders if I could ever really leave, if I wanted to, or if I'm too tangled in the web she's spun. Sometimes, when she smiles at me, I imagine it's genuine. Other times, I can't shake the thought that every smile, every small act of kindness, is another carefully placed move in a game I can't win, and so, I sit here, caught between love and control, hope and doubt. Asking myself a question I can't answer: if the person you love most in the world is also the one who holds all the power, does leaving make you free? Or just weaker?